Okay, well, welcome everyone in cyberspace. Uh, Thank you very much for attending the seminar. Today I want to talk about the value of local and sustainable labels and what it means for our green industry. So when you talk about marketing sustainable and local, I think that there has been this interchangeable interface where we talk about green and sustainability and local, and we do this as marketers with the hope that it's an important process and helps consumers to understand and value certain things. And those things could be green industry products, that could be food, that could be household products. But we use this eco-labeling term to serve as a signal regarding environmentally features of a product. We hope that it makes products more appealing. And we hope that this helps us to find ways to segment consumers more efficiently, which we all know is very important. But the problem becomes, what does it all mean? And I think that what we find is that there are several definitions out there when it comes to local and sustainable and environmentally friendly or eco-friendly. And each consumer and each company tends to have their own working definition of what that is. So when we talk about what does it all mean, are we saying that we're meeting the needs of the present without compromising future generations? And as nice as that sounds, does that mean that we focus on biodegradable pots? Do we focus on low inputs? Do we focus on pesticides? Is that what really drives consumers in their behavior? Or is it organic and certification? And so hopefully the things that I talk about in this webinar may help you to put some of the pieces together. I don't think that she will come away saying, aha, she has laid out the specific answer, but I think what you'll see are things that resonate with consumers when it comes to environmental behaviors, environmental concerns, why they may choose certain products, and I think that you can walk away with some things that will work for your individual organization. So when you think about local, one of the things that I see is that it's subjective to the retailer or consumer perception. You can think about farmers markets, or you can talk about transportation sources to and from a supermarket, or even how far inputs have traveled to get to you to then put them into a place where we can grow particular products. Whole Foods, for example, says that local is anywhere within a day's drive. And depending on where you are, you could go pretty far within a day, even with transportation limits and how far truck drivers can drive. But if you go to a farmer's market, you could say that local is within that county. It could be within a 2-hour radius. And again, thinking about where people are, whether they're in Texas or whether they're in Indiana or whether they're in Illinois, a 2 to 3 hour radius means a lot. So it's very subjective, and it's, again, specific to whatever that company or what that consumer thinks. When you put these two terms together, sustainability and local, there were a group of researchers, which includes myself from Purdue, Dr. Jennifer Dennis, Dr. Roberto Lopez, who's our floriculture specialist, Stephanie Burnett, Dr. Stephanie Burnett, and Dr. Neil Matson over on the East Coast. We came up with this research coalition and defined sustainability specific to greenhouses as an operation or business who aims to reduce environmental degradation, maintains agricultural productivity, promotes economic viability, conserves resources and energy, and maintains stable communities and quality of life. Now again, although we talk about conservation of the environment, these things are very vague, and I think that when we talk about using sustainability and local in a label or creating a signal for that particular consumer, we're trying to figure out specific ways that we can resonate with that consumer or figure out ways that they can understand the benefits of what it is that we're trying to do. So let's go through and look at some of the product categories and how people are using green products and how they feel about green labels. And then let's bring that back to what the green industry can learn from this. The last slide that I talked about, case in point, the reason why I put that up there is because so many things, when you look at environmental concerns or sustainability, they have very vague definitions. And I think that overall what you'll see in this presentation is the theme is that we have to figure out how to translate those benefits as effective marketers to our consumers. So when we look at the green product category in household cleaners, here we're looking at a mature market. It's been around for a while. When we talk about household cleaners and environmentally friendly products, products have been available since 2002. And in 2011, if you look at green label products, they accounted for nearly 3 in 10 new product introductions. Most of the successful products will be those that provide multiple benefits rather than a single function. And I'm going to talk about product categories separate for just a second and then kind of bring it all together in terms of what consumers want and how they look at this. Green household paper products, so we're talking about your paper towels or anything that is in the home that's made within a paper state, accounted for about 3 in 10 category launches in 2011. And although the household cleaner market is more of a mature market, here the green household paper market, there's still plenty of room for companies to introduce more eco-friendly products. So we'll say that if you think about the product life cycle, we're more in a growth phase. Other categories, when you think about green products, are dependent on sometimes governmental regulations. An example of that would be fluctuating gas prices and how the government regulates. And I think that when you look at regulations with respect to the automotive industry, we know that this has been the impetus for why consumers are starting to choose things like green or electric vehicles. And so when you look at consumers who think about buying green or electric vehicles, they're faced with obviously the choice of a premium for the benefit, and for that particular reason it may be beneficial for them to buy an automobile that costs a little bit more but will provide more benefits. And I think that consumers question whether the increased cost of going green is worth the money. And this is not just for the automotive industry, but this is for any particular green product. I'll use myself as an example. I bought a diesel vehicle for the fact that diesel engines last longer, but also that it's with the clean diesel technology, using diesel gives me better gas mileage. And I think that regardless of what the signal, whether it's eco-friendly or some other type of attribute, consumers are always looking for what's the value for their money. And you'll see a little bit later in the slides, this same situation keeps coming up. So the sustainable food and drink sector category is still in its infancy phase, and you'll see a lot of research from Mintel reports that I put into the report for today that talks about why consumers like or dislike eco-friendly or green types of products. But there's still a long way to go when you look at the sustainable food and drink sector. And then lastly, when you look at the green and horticulture industry, we're still growing and much room for improvement. Charlie Hall, Dr. Hall talked about this Green Industry Research Consortium, and within the last 5 to 6 years, we've really focused on sustainability efforts from the consumer standpoint, but also where growers are in terms of being ready to implement certain technologies. And what you see is that people are still trying to figure out whether consumers are really willing to pay, will acknowledge premiums and pay premiums for products that are grown in a certain light, and in this case that would be eco-friendly. So let's talk about a couple of market drivers when we look at sustainable and green and local claims. Basically what you find is that product messages and product claims are the #1 reasons that consumer buys eco-friendly green types of products. They're looking for superior quality, 45% of people surveyed. They're looking for the concern for the environment or human welfare, and they're looking for food safety. Those reasons alone are the top reasons why people are buying sustainable or eco-friendly types of products. When you look at packaging claims, they're looking for things that include less waste, that they're lightweight, they've somehow reduced or minimized the packaging. And again, thinking about environmental concerns and how they can contribute to doing their part. These are some of the things that convey over into behavior, not just looking at the product, but actually buying it. And this is across all types of product categories that we've talked about. Psychographics, from a marketing standpoint, people's opinions, attitudes, and interests are very important, and their perceived quality and pragmatic measures such as food safety play a key important role. As marketers, we've always said that opinions drive behavior. The demographics are important to understand, but it's really those psychographic or those attitudes and interests and opinions that people have that translate into whether they're going to buy or not buy. And then lastly, demographics do play a role. The under 45s and some Generation X are in there, but really the millennials are drivers in terms of eco-friendly attitudes. And that's not to say that we don't leave out older generations. You'll see here that certain age groups desire or think about are motivated by different things when it comes to eco-friendly. And I'll put some of that information up for you in just a few minutes. So here, demographics, again, they play a role. And it's not just the under 45s, but the affluent consumers are the ones that are most likely to purchase these particular products. And again, I'll show you in just a few minutes.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Here are the definitions, and that most packaging claims talk about recyclable, eco or environmentally friendly product claims like all natural or organic. And although they're fairly well known to consumers, when you ask them what do they mean, they can't really tell you, and I'll show you in just a few seconds an example of that. When you use solar, wind energy, or fair trade in your particular label as a signal, this hasn't really gone to the mainstream consumer. So if you think about this again in terms of who's adopting what in product life cycles, when you look at terms like fair trade and solar or wind energy usage, consumers sort of blank out. They're not really sure. They know that it's good for them. They know it's a sign of some type of eco or environmentally friendly trait, but they're still not sure how to translate that into something that's going to help them do their part within society. And especially in the over 55 and less affluent customers, those households earning less than $50,000 annually, these terms, solar, wind energy usage, and fair trade, really mean nothing in terms of getting people to buy and translating that into behavior. So here's an example. Our Green Industry Research Consortium did a study a couple of years ago, and we are working on producing and getting those results out. So there's not a lot of information in here, but I wanted to give you an example. We have surveyed consumers who are gardening consumers and asked them about definition of eco-friendly. And what we found was that there was no exact definition of eco-friendly, that many consumers interchanged this term with green. And when you talked about eco-friendly, other terms that they used to define this included organic, which we know that organic and eco-friendly are not the same thing. Organic means that it is produced without certain things like irradiation. But they thought that eco-friendly also meant reduced greenhouse gases, that people or companies or products somehow have some type of social responsibility, that they were energy saving or had some type of conservation component, that they were lower in carbon footprint, although they can't always tell you what carbon footprint means, and that maybe some of the traits included in something that was eco-friendly would be biodegradable and recyclable. And so what we're doing as a research group is looking at, if you've heard the term eco-friendly, you were more likely to be in a particular category. And so those results are coming soon. Look out for those. But the point here is to see that even within our industry, there's such a huge interchangeability of what something means, especially as it pertains to eco-friendly. Let's talk about the same thing for sustainable. 93% of people who we surveyed heard the term eco-friendly. But when you talked about the term sustainable, and that's really the focus of what we're talking about today, 75% had heard of that. Now, don't get me wrong, those are still huge percentages. But again, you see a lot more interchanging of environmentally friendly traits when you talk more about eco-friendly, less so when you talk about sustainable. Sustainable generally was perceived as green. And again, we can continue to dive into, so what do you mean by green? I think that these things are all interchangeable. And one of the challenges that we have as marketers is helping them understand what this means. And you'll see a little bit more about that. And again, we're working on digging deeper into the data to see if consumers were familiar with sustainable. Here are some of the traits that they had. So again, look out for that particular study. So let's go back to challenges with sustainability. When we're trying to figure out how valuable are these particular terms to consumers, what you find is that most consumers have little idea of what these claims really mean. There's no clear solution that exists for companies and how to impart this knowledge. And I think that is the part where, as a infant product category here, looking at sustainable, looking at eco-friendly, looking at the idea of local and integrating that into our marketing strategies, we have to do a good job at showing consumers what is green, what is sustainable, what is eco-friendly, how do they differ, and then create that into your value proposition, show them how that benefits them. So most businesses, and this is across all product categories, not just the green industry, most businesses that focus on consumer information when it comes to sustainability, they take the less is more approach. They opt out of giving information. And so what happens then is, again, it's sort of, I should know what this is. I'm ashamed to say that I don't know what it is, and I'm going to go and see if I can find some information. You have 30% of consumers who will go and look at websites, and even less than that will go and utilize social network sites. But they're not going to go in and say, I don't understand what this is, because there's this internal pressure and also peer pressure of, I should know what to do. I should know how to be sustainable. I know that it's good for me, good for the environment, good for future generations to contribute and behave in an eco-friendly or sustainable or environmentally friendly fashion. That doesn't mean I always know what to do to obtain that. And so that's one particular issue that you have. People don't know what this is. When you look at the claims like natural and sustainable and green being applied to nearly every product category without any real definition standard in place, you may want to think about the fact that consumers eventually give up trying to figure out what these things mean and whether they're meaningful. And if you think about where people are, checking their pocketbooks, looking at whether whatever product that they're considering, whether it meets the needs, the immediate needs of their particular, let's say, shopping outing, or, you know, when they make that decision that they're going to buy something, regardless of whether they need it, they're looking for the thing that's going to give them the most value. And if they don't understand what this means, that means they can't place whether this is valuable. And so one of the things, and I'm not advocating for this, but one of the things that we need to think about is, should certification standards be placed on terms such as natural or sustainable, or even at a minimum green, to alleviate consumer confusion. And that's one way, one spectrum, end of the spectrum to look at it. The other end of the spectrum is to just simply show them what's the difference in between these different titles and start to educate that consumer. So there's the other issue. People don't know what it means. They can't place a value on whether this is something that they need. And if they can't place a value, we can't even begin to talk about whether premiums are important. So I think there's some communication there. Now, that's the mainstream consumer. And there's also this consumer that is dedicated. They are people who believe that the environment is important. They believe that they should look at the environment and help to save it for themselves. They may want to help to save it for future generations. They may want to save it because it's the right thing to do globally. Regardless, there's this dedicated green shopper that's still a minority of consumers. They account for 1/3 of the population. They look at green claims and they're okay with them. Now, the mainstream population, they look at green claims and they see them mostly as a turnoff, since green is often perceived as not as good as the regular product, that it tends to be overpriced, and with respect to food, it doesn't taste as good. And so again, we all know that 80% of our business comes from 20% of our customers. We could always say, well, let's just go ahead and find that dedicated green shopper. But in order to sustain this, we know that we're going to have to bring in some of the mainstream and address some of these concerns about why green claims are not always seen in the best light. So here's a chart that just looks at food and drink purchases, and this is for adults that were 18 plus who purchased food and drink with sustainable claims. And you see there's about 1,700 people within this particular survey. This is one that Mintel did, and they've broken it up by male and female population, and they've looked at some of the reasons that people are buying food or drink with sustainable claims. What you see here is that women recognize higher quality and concerned about food safety more often than men, and was one of the factors that contributed to why they were buying food products. When we look at men and their impetus for buying, it was more of the right thing to do, or they wanted to try something new. So you have those diehards that say, I'm about the environment, but you have some people, and you could argue whether they were mainstream or not, who just said, hey, let's try something fun and let's do something different. Regardless, both demographic groups have something that is leading them towards these particular purchases. We can look at this with respect to age. This is the same demographic group of people, 18 plus, who purchase food or drink items with sustainable claims. And what you saw was that the younger population, those 18 to 44, and those people who are on the webinar who are not 44, I still consider you young. Here, what you saw was that higher quality resonated with them, and that was one of the major reasons of why they purchased food items that had a sustainable claim. And then also, when you look at this try something new category, you have the 18 to 24 to about the 55, 54 mark that has said realistically that trying something new was something that was important to them. Across all age categories, you see a concern about the environment and concern about food safety. So going back to these labels and looking at, one, distinguishing what's the difference between green, eco-friendly, sustainable, local. What are you going to tell your consumers? You know that certain categories of people, whether they're female or male, and depending on age, will have different reasons. Quality is important. We know for women, food safety is important. Doing the right thing is important for men. Trying something new is important. Across ages, you have, let's say, some overlap with respect to not just being male or female, but depending on where you are in the age category, some younger people may be interested in trying something new, and you can position it that way. You can talk about quality, you can talk about the concerns about the environment and how your product actually addresses or alleviates some problem. And that could be in packaging, that could be in the inputs. But again, conveying that message is very important. And then, of course, food safety, I would assume if we were in other product categories, this would not be the case. But, obviously this was for a food or drink item. When you look at income, and we talked about earlier that the more affluent, and we'd say that would be, over 75K, when you look at what their real relationship is with why people are buying sustainable items, and in this case, food. Oh, I need to go back. Let's see if I can go back. You see that Higher quality and concerned about food safety, again, was one of the higher concerns for groups in that particular category. And then, again, if you look across categories in the 100K mark, higher quality is also something that's very important. Concerned about the environment was important, although the 75 to 99,000 income range had a little bit more importance on that particular factor. So you start to see a theme in what are the key terms or issues that you can use to help create an opening for consumers to understand or even listen to why some sustainable and green claims are important. So if we look at adults 18 plus who purchase food or drink with sustainable claims, and then look at things like why would you use or buy these particular items, and if the categories included creating less waste, supporting brands that are helping the environment, I like the taste or flavor and will buy even without these claims, I try something new, I like the way the package looked, and then the last one, I apologize, you can't see that, is none of the above. What you see is that regardless of whether they're male or female, creating less waste and supporting brands that help the environment are things that are important. So again, the message, as I am positioning my particular product, if I want to use sustainability, eco-friendly within as an attribute, these are things that are most important to these types of consumers. Likewise, if I look at people who did not purchase food or drink with sustainable claims, one of the key things that they talk about is not noticing that the claims were on the product that they bought. And so again, going back to some companies use the approach that talking about sustainability less is their, I guess, I don't want to say right to do so, but it's the choice that they make in terms of marketing. They rather market a different attribute. Those people who might have bought based on the fact that it's sustainable miss out on that option to do so because it's not apparent to that particular consumer. When you look at food consumers who purchase green, they are known as true foodies and reformed traditionals. And there are lots of different attributes about this particular group of people. Generally speaking, when we talk about this particular group, and let's start with the true foodies, what you see is that they are likely to use organic milk and produce as well as agree with most statements that pertain to diet, health, and food. They tend to be eco-conscious. They prioritize eating well, healthy lifestyles, family and friends. They include them in the discussions about topics and how they choose their particular food. Being knowledgeable about ingredients, curious about new healthy foods and how it relates to their body. So this is a lifestyle, this is their well-being. And they're trying to stay away from artificial ingredients and fast foods. And so they're looking for things that are without particular agents. They're looking for things that are not processed as much. They're looking for things that include less inputs. When you look at the reformed traditional, they think that sustainable food and drink is promising. They're trying to improve their eating. They're seeking out products free of artificial ingredients as a means of eating better. But the difference between this group, and I would say this is more of the mainstream group, this group does not often speak with friends about nutrition or try new health foods, which suggests that they are often making cautious food decisions on their own. And in terms of relating to sustainable food and drink, this may not resonate with them because it doesn't really mean a lot to these consumers. The true foodies, this was their lifestyle. So this is that third of the population who's a green consumer anywhere, whereas the reformed traditionals, they're going to do something because it's something to try. They may do something because it creates a better lifestyle. They'll be the ones who won't buy it because they didn't see the sustainability claim on the package. But they're not looking to change their lifestyle in every form or facet for the sake of being environmentally friendly. These two groups together tend to value the importance of living with eco-consciousness in their everyday lives, true foodies more so than reformed traditionals. But I think that both of these particular groups believe that companies should do more, and they're looking for companies to show what they're doing that contributes to sustainability, environmentally friendliness, and that will then translate into purchases for sustainable type products for these particular groups. And again, the latter group, Reformed Traditionals, especially is looking for companies to lead the way before they go out and buy. Prices for these types of products should be more affordable. They believe that. And again, there's a separate group that does say that they will have premiums, and our research that is coming out will show you some of those groups of people, who they are, what they look like. So there is a group of people who will pay more for these traits, but in general, they're looking for conformity across categories, that companies are doing this because they want to, and not just because this is a marketing ploy, marketing gimmick, something to get people in. And if all of those things are equal, they expect for these products to perform the same. They expect for these products to do the same, if not more, and they expect for it to be consistently at around that same price. The Reformed Traditionals are not as likely to believe eco-friendly products are of higher quality, and they need more proof, but in a way to digest. So going back to the confusion between these particular definitions of what they mean, the Reformed Traditional, you are more likely to lose if you don't convey those benefits. So going back to it has to be about explaining why this is environmentally friendly, how that helps the consumer, why the company believes in it. That's what's going to get this group of people out. True foodies, they believe in it anyway and are going to value that particular label. Some deterrents. Also, when consumers did not buy, going back to what we talked about, they didn't see the relevant claims on the packaging. They saw higher prices. The quality wasn't the same. They didn't trust the claims of that particular company. The lack of product availability. So they looked for it but could not find it. And this is obviously for people who use it on a less basis than those who are, hardcore, our 80-20 rule. So one of the marketing messages that I see from what I've talked about so far is that products that do not show the value proposition of value and performance in addition to environmentally friendly will not make it. So it can't just be that sustainability is the key driving attribute. It has to be in addition to other proponents that are important to that particular consumer group. More issues with consumers. When you think about sustainability, local and green claims, social issues overall tend to be more important than green issues. And so consumers are more interested in things like children's welfare, poverty, homelessness, domestic violence, and will use that in their consideration set to buy a product. And then if it's green, that's a bonus, okay? So other things that are important, water contamination and air pollution are top environmental concerns amongst consumers. And men and women have slightly different opinions. Sorry, I keep forgetting that you can't see it if I don't click, so I apologize. Men and women have slightly different opinions about green issues. Women are more interested in water pollution. Men tend to have more, they resonate more with reliance on fossil fuels. And I don't even understand why this particular partition between men and women. I'm just thinking that maybe some of the causes that they like are different. But that's another issue for another day, and maybe something to dive into a little bit deeper about why that particular pattern comes out that way. Some explanation to this is that, men might be motivated by more than environmental factors, and that the financial impact and politics of energy have a stronger influence. But again, trying to understand this in terms of why men resonate with one particular environmental concern versus women and another, more information really needs to be done with that. You go back to looking at some of the data and people's concerns about sustainability and green claims. This is a separate group of people here that were surveyed, 2,000 internet users over the age of 18, and we asked well, I didn't ask, but Mintel asked what they were most concerned about and what they were least concerned about. What we saw was contamination of local fresh water supplies, air pollution from factories and transportation, and ocean pollution such as sewage discharge, oil spills, and garbage being some of the things that they were most concerned about. And again, you see other things like climate change, ground pollution, deforestation, not meaning they're not important, but again, if you look at the index, people surveyed here were most concerned about these particular issues. Some of the things they were least concerned about were plastic products, were overpopulation and mining. So mountaintop removal mining, strip mining, open pit mining. Now you may say, well, Jennifer, what does this have to do with the value of sustainable and local labels? Well, again, trying to figure out what that value proposition is, understanding what is on the mind of your consumers, and it may be different for different areas. For example, obviously, in Indiana, we probably would not be the ocean pollution part, whereas some people may be interested in it. It may not be one of the top concerns. So we haven't found this, but I would hypothesize that some of these issues will be subjective to the areas that you live in and some of the immediate concerns that are around that particular area. Going back to what people are most concerned about and looking at them with respect to male versus female, what you see is that males, we talked about this earlier, the reliance of fossil fuels for energy and overpopulation were some of the key issues that resonated with males, whereas females, the contamination of local fresh water supplies and the ocean pollution were pretty big. And of course, you see some other numbers here that show that there are some concerns about some other things, but when you look at it specifically from a male versus female perspective, these were the two issues that shook out the most. Another thing, according to this survey, is when you look by age, contamination of the local freshwater supply resonated more with people in the 55 and older category. There were the climate change and global warming resonated with 18 to 24-year-old age group and the 25 to 34-year-old age group. So here, my millennials and baby boomers were more interested in climate change and global warming. And if you read up on the millennials, you'll see a lot of the climate change continuously. Those that care about the environment and are not caring, they care about it because it's what they believe in and not our peer-induced people who are in the social pressure to want to consider environmental concerns because they have this peer pressure to. Those people are consistently interested in climate change and global warming. And then you also see in the younger category, the 18 to 24 to 25 to 34-year-old age range, you see reliance on fossil fuels for energy as one of their key concerns as well. One of the last things that I want to talk about in terms of lifestyles and behaviors, especially as it has to do with sustainable and eco-friendly and local labels, is that when you think about generally the customer that we're looking at, and you saw in the beginning the product categories, and there was only one that was really in a mature stage. The rest of them were growing or in infant stages. So the household products were still growing. The green industry obviously is in a stage where we're still growing, and there's still a lot of work to be done in the issue of marketing effectively and understanding consumers' opinions and values of eco-friendly terms. But what you see is that 10% of consumers, and this is obviously in the U.S., 10% of consumers surveyed consider themselves to be leading a green lifestyle. I'm going to put the foodies in that category. When it comes to food products, there is a group of people who obviously, when it comes to household cleaners and household paper items, that will be diehards that are going to spend their time, money, regardless of the price, to make sure that they're contributing to the environment and their well-being. There is a group of people, however, and this is probably the Reformed traditionals. This could be some of the other consumer groups that are in the more mainstream lifestyle who do not think that green is attainable. And the reason they think that green is not attainable is because they don't know what it is. they don't understand how to incorporate it into their daily lifestyles. And if they don't know how to do that, they don't understand how to incorporate the value of what we're giving them when we say that these products are grown, have been produced, have less miles, have traveled a very short distance to get to that particular consumer. They don't understand how to incorporate that into their consideration set. Older respondents tend to be less convinced that they are leading a green lifestyle, although they want to make changes to become more green. So the marketing message there is we need to work on showing people ways to do this and helping them understand how what they're doing is going to make an impact. When you look at the millennials, what you see is that respondents are most likely to think that they are more green than the rest of their age counterparts. But the funny thing is, although they think they're doing the most to be the most sustainable, they are also the ones that feel like their actions will not really make a difference. And that's quite a conundrum there, to see those two opinions be so far apart. So let's talk about some marketing messages. When you think about what we've talked about with respect to how consumers feel, where people are in their mind frames and thoughts, where product categories are, and what we can do, seeing that we're still in the infancy stage, to get consumers to a place. And again, I'm not saying that the entire population will be consumed or want to know about green labels, but those that we can, that are curious, that are interested, that want to do something, and then those diehards, how can we consistently deliver to them and show them the value of eco-friendly, sustainable, and local labels? Companies can offer ways to help consumers make small changes to be green, and that could be part of your marketing message. That could be workshops that you put on, and you'll start to see those diehards come and those that are curious about what they can do. And those diehards may bring their curious friends. And that's where you start to interact with those consumer groups and figure out of some of the things that I'm telling you here, because not every one of those things is going to resonate with a particular consumer. But what are the people thinking in your particular area, and how can you translate that into a marketing message? Ask yourselves, how do consumers think they're contributing to a green lifestyle? And based on what they think and what's actually happening, what can you teach them? Where's the teachable moment? Where can you market or create messages that help them to understand what they could be doing differently, or how much water they could save if they, implement a new step? You want to obviously use the messages that you have created within your company to boost the self-image about environmental practices, and not just that environmental practices are important, but also creating an environment where you can help the consumer feel proud about what changes they've made and how it affects the environment. And that could be done in ways like congratulating them on making the right choices, offering programs that help to congratulate them or show some type of improvement, and offering suggestions on easy ways to be more green. I think that green and local go hand in hand. There are lots of people who tend to think locally when it comes to concerns about the environment. So just what I talked about in terms of that category where ocean pollution was a primary concern, I'm sure it's not a primary concern for everyone in the U.S. And I'm assuming the closer you are to areas, that, have that type of environment, the more that issue becomes important. And so here, understanding, the drivers of what's going on and how you may be able to tie into that in the product categories that you're trying to sell, I think that's important. The other marketing message is that consumers care about numerous causes. And I think that green could be your primary, or eco-friendly could be your primary attribute, but there has to be a second attribute that goes along with it. And so companies should promote green in addition to other social causes that may have more impact among their target consumers. And we've talked about some of those things: child welfare, domestic violence, are things that are important. And again, going back to that local issue, it may not be an issue for every consumer, or there may be something that maybe has happened more prevalent in that community that may trump some of the green causes, but again, combining them will help. That will definitely help with more mainstream. And, you know, again, as we know that different segments may have different messages that we give them, we will continue to explain the green message to those diehards, those 10% of the population, that 1/3 of the population that is interested in green activities regardless. And we're going to integrate green into other types of messages that we're giving other consumers that may not see that as their primary concern. And as a marketer, I think that's what we need to do is, one, identify which consumers which, understand what are some of their reasons for buying, wanting to contribute to the environment, and then showing them how to do some things. And that's even for the diehards. You know, there's always a teachable moment. So the next step, I've talked a lot about other product categories, but our Green Industry Research Consortium group is looking into what does this mean for our industry. And we're specifically, we have a couple of papers that are coming out that we will also translate into trade publications and mainstream media sources where people can understand the relationships between these environmental concerns and their willingness, to engage in pro-environmental activities and behaviors. And so, you know, again, that'll be coming out soon, within the next couple of months to a year, and we will specifically address what those mean for the green industry. One thing I wanted to just pique your interest, and you've probably heard about this before, but one of the newer projects that we're doing has to do with eye tracking and understanding what information they take in to make a decision. And so one of the things that we have been doing is looking at information, and in this case, the information that we're looking at has to do with sustainability claims versus things like price and product display and what contributes to their factors, whether the content is more important to them, whether the price, or whether the display is more important. And so again, those results will be coming out, so please look for it. Please look for those. Lastly, I've talked about the Green Research Consortium quite a bit, and these are some of the colleagues that contribute to that: Dr. Bridget Behe, Dr. Ben Campbell, Dr. Charlie Hall, who of course is your host, Dr. Tom Fernandez, myself, Jennifer Dennis, Pat Huddleston, Dr. Pat Huddleston from Michigan State, Chen-Yang Yi, Dr. Yi from University of Minnesota, Hike Hachaturain from the University of Florida, and then two students and technicians, Allison Jones and Lynn Sage, who've also helped to kind of make some of the items that we've talked about briefly in the latter part of the webinar a reality. So I just wanted to thank them. So that's all I have for you right now. I want to thank you for listening and tuning in to the webinar. I am more than happy to entertain any questions. So that's it for right now, and thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You covered a lot of ground there, Jennifer, in a short period of time, so that was very cool. I'm going to take back the presentation rights from you for just a second.
Okay.
And then come back to what everybody's seeing on the screen right now. But before we get to the webinar site where folks can check the recording, let me ask you these couple of questions. We've got one from a good friend of ours who I won't mention his name, but he's a great guy. And he says, can you give us an example of a company that's doing a good job of producing and promoting itself and its products as being sustainable? So I'll let you take a crack at it. I got a couple of suggestions myself, but go ahead.
Oh, boy. Let me think about that.
Well, while you're thinking, let me rattle off my list, and
okay,
that'll give you a chance. You know, the list of companies is not exhaustive, but we got some folks doing some pretty interesting things in the green industry. Outside the green industry, you got folks like Wegmans in the Northeast. They've got a tremendous reputation in terms of their sustainability aspects, and they've gotten a lot of recognition for it. But in our industry specifically, you've got folks like Rick Brown down in Florida, Riverview Flower Farms, and he's very widely known for his sustainable aspects of his product. Now, he sells most of his stuff to Home Depot under the label of Florida-friendly plants, and what plants do well in the Florida environment that would require fewer, fewer inputs, less water, etc., which makes it a more sustainable product. Then you've got, when El Zingas was still in business, obviously they were pretty widely known for their organic line of herbs and vegetables. So, that's a case study in itself about how some people move before the time of the trend. Yeah, Ed Overdevest in New Jersey, Overdevest Nurseries, has his Footprints line of plant materials in which he's emphasizing that these are plants that are grown with a lower carbon water footprint. Maria Kreidermacher up in Stan Palmer's neck of the woods. I noticed Stan was online today, so a quick shout out to Stan. But you got Porkin plants that I think they were GPN's award winner in 2008 for their the way in which they heat their greenhouses, etc. So we've got a number of firms. One more just crossed in my brain here was Gary Mangum and the folks at Bell Nursery. They're Vera Flora certified. And you got Seville Farms here in Texas, Vera Flora certified. So there's a number of folks that have gotten the Vera Flora certification and have used that to basically set themselves apart within the industry with press releases, etc. But the real point, as you said, Jennifer, is that we've got to separate ourselves within the mind of the consumer.
Yeah, and Charlie, if I could just add to that, I think one of the reasons why I hesitated was because it's that point. I think you see a lot of companies, and we have some great examples in Indiana of people who are starting to use sustainable technologies, but translating that to the consumer is the real issue. We have several people, Ellsbury's Greenhouse in Columbus, Indiana, that are using alternative energy sources, in saving money. Crossroads Greenhouse in Indianapolis are also very crucial in doing alternative energy sources. Waters Gardens in Zeeland, Michigan is another example. They got an energy grant to do some of their work. You have Mid-America Growers in Granville, Illinois. They also are part of the alternative energy sources. El Zinga, like you talked about. Mm-hmm. Kalamazoo, Michigan, they're using windmills for energy. So there are, lots of different places. Neil Mass and Son Greenhouses, they received a USDA grant for greenhouse energy curtains. Mm-hmm. So there are tons of people who are doing great stuff, and I think that the problem is that, we say, here's our plant material, and look, it's grown this way, and the consumer scratches their head and says, huh? And then there's this short percentage of people who say, okay, I get it, and I want to do something for the environment.
Yeah, and it's still, it's a problem now, but it's an opportunity for us in the future.
Right.
Okay, a couple other quick questions. We're coming up at 11:58. Got a couple more minutes for the top of the hour. Just squeeze this in. I had a question about who are the Reformed traditionals demographically?
Okay. So what I can do, because I don't want to take up a lot of time, is I'll send some information to Charlie. Charlie, if I send it to you, would you be able to attach it to the webinar or send out something? Okay. So I'll send out information about typical profile of who they are to save time.
Yeah. Cool. Marco, as you go down the list of questions, did you come across one?
Sure. And I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to try to combine a couple of questions. One question said that they have built-in Google Analytics to the back end of products to track the use and metrics. And there were other couple of questions about the future of biodegradable containers and the potential for sales for pesticide-free plants. So I'm going to combine those questions and ask Dr. Dennis, when you, if I'm a grower and I'm interested in the cost-benefit analysis, and I'm trying to do this not just because it is the right thing to do, because I believe in sustainability, but are there any additional benefits, and do those benefits outweigh the cost of implementing some of these production practices? Can you provide us with some examples of some of the work that you've done in this area?
What I'll say is that we do have some studies that are coming out that indeed show that there is a premium that consumers are willing to pay for sustainable grown products, and that could be, the pesticide-free, and other sustainable attributes. So I guess, in a nutshell, I'll say yes, it is worth it. The question is figuring out who that customer is. I think regardless of who you are and where you're sending your stuff to, if you can't identify that there are some people interested in green, either by what they're already doing in other realms, recycling, glass, aluminum, or other types of products, then it's not worth it. So the whole point is understanding where you're selling and what those consumers have. But yes, it is worth it, and there are people who are willing to pay more for it.
Okay, I noticed the clock ticked past the top of the hour, and what we can do, Jennifer, is that the remaining questions that are unanswered, what we've done in the past is I'll send you those, and we can generate a response, and then post those online along with the link to the webinar recording.
Okay.
And of course, folks can see the website in which these webinars are listed on the page on the webinar screen right now. It's ellisonchair.tamu.edu/multimedia/webinars. And you can see that for the last one that I gave back in November, there's a link to the video as well as responses to questions, and then a copy of the slides. So we can do a similar thing here where we can answer all those questions we didn't have time to get to. But I do want to appreciate, express my appreciation to Jennifer for her sharing her knowledge today on this subject. As she mentioned, there's a lot of things coming down the pike. You did a great job, Jennifer, so thank you very much.
No
Marco,
problem.
thanks again, good buddy, for serving as co-host, and the audience, thank you for attending today. Be on the lookout for the link that will be coming through your email as far as a link to the recording. But also, as soon as I close out, you're going to be sent a link to an evaluation. And what that evaluation does is not just grade Jennifer on her webinar performance. We know that was stellar, but it gives us an idea and some feedback that we can share with the granting agency, in this case the Southern Region Risk Management Center, to help justify future grants and continuing this type of informational online webinar series. So thanks very much for your feedback as far as that's concerned. So folks, we'll close out today. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.